Hello everyone and welcome back to 3D Print Lab. Today we'll be printing a video game model. We'll be printing the Turn Siege Tank. Phase 1 is location. You have to go and find one in the Starcraft 2 universe. Phase 2 is extraction. So we're going to open up the MPQ archive extractor and go ahead and extract out the .m3 files and then import them into 3ds Max using the .m3 plugin tools. Now the tank, the siege mode tank and the regular mode of the tank are two different files, so you gotta import them separately. So we went ahead and we colored them the colors that we're going to be printing them later on, teal and orange. And went ahead and scaled over the scale key. Phase 3 is coordination. Now, a lot of faces are missing on these models, so we're going to go ahead and bridge any missing faces that we find. It's very important to do this, otherwise when you go to print you'll just get a bunch of shells and you won't be left with a solid model. Even the underside of this turret had some missing faces as well. A little bit difficult to see some of these, but overall the model is pretty easy to deal with. Not too bad. So now we're going to bring in the Thingiverse. Thingiverse Makeaware. And we're going to do a test slice and see how it's going to print. I don't think it's going to print very well flat, so we're going to try printing it vertically and see what we can do to support it. If we print it this way, we won't have to have as much support, because anything that is building up and out won't have to be supported. So we're going to have to go back into 3ds Max and we're going to have to orient it so it's vertical. Then we're going to take our gap supports. Can't remember what I was calling it back in the day. It's like highlight support or something. It's been a while since I've made some of these videos. Anyway, I'm just gonna go ahead and put our pillar support, which is also gapped. Everywhere there needs to be support. The yellow disc represents the spacing between the model and the support that needs to exist in order for the support material to be easily removed. This one layer of gap spacing helps so significantly in a derating process to remove support. It goes from breaking it off and leaving things behind to it just gently falling off and there's nothing left behind whatsoever. You can't even tell there was support at all. This is one of the major discoveries within 3D printing I've made over the last 2 years, is that support material needs to have a one layer gap spacing in order to work correctly. It will force delamination on that layer and not leave anything behind. So we can slice it off within Makeaware and see that it's going to print just fine. Although there was an issue with this one overhang that we missed, so we're going to go ahead and add support for that as well. And boolean it to the rest of the support so it will print as one geometry. Now moving on to the siege mode version of the tank. The bottom once again has a lot of faces missing. So we're going to have to go ahead and go and make sure we fix all those, close all those gaps. It's a little bit more intensive with this one, and the top of the model is very, very thin in some places. I wasn't able to repair everything. And as you can see, the turret is actually separate from the rest of the model. It's floating in midair. So it needs to be patched up as well as brought down to sit with the rest of the model. And I'm sure they just modeled it this way so that it can rotate without ripping polygons and whatever. Such forth. All kinds of tricks they do to make models work for video games, but not exactly sure if they were ever intended to be 3D printed. But it just happens to work out that you can do it. Once again, we're going to be printing this vertically. It will lessen the amount of support we need so that things can build up and out instead of having to support everything from your horizontal position. The worst thing about printing horizontal, I think, would be that you'd have to support the turret internally within the model, and that's not really possible without having support that ultimately you won't be able to remove it. It's going to be in there because you need it, and then once you try to remove it, it's going to be impossible to remove. So we're just going to go ahead and analyze where we're going to need to place our support material. It's going to be pretty extensive, the amount of support material we're going to need, and we need to reference this slicing of the model multiple times in order to really get a good visualization of what needs to happen. So it's going to rotate at 90 degrees and align it Z with the rest of the support material so that everything is on the same Z plane. And we're just going to go ahead and start supporting it with our gap support. It's going to kill me trying to think of what I used to call that. The pillar support or something. Well, it looks like an obelisk, and that's what it is. It's obelisk support. This is a newer version of obelisk support. There's a yellow disc on top that represents and helps you place the gap, and you just delete the yellow disc as soon as you're done placing the support material. I just think it works great to get the gap consistent every time. There always seems to be maybe one or two places where the gap doesn't turn out perfect, but it does help quite a bit. I'm not sure if a 2 or 3, maybe 4 or 5 layer gap would make a difference. That might be something worth checking into, honestly. Do some testing and see what kind of layer gap I can get away with. Although honestly, I feel like anything more than 2 or 3 layers is going to delaminate so hard that nothing will print on top. It'll just shift off. But I don't know. You never know. I've seen some models they print. It seems like the layer gap is huge. It's easy to de-rig. There is some automatic support systems that do, add the layer gap feature, but it's just, it'll put support in all the random places you don't need it. I've seen Mesh Mixer wrap support around models so bad that there's no way you'll ever even Dremel it off. I don't know, sometimes it just does not get the skill right. Try to add automatic support within Makerware, and it's just terrible. It's just a solid brick, and then I don't know what you do. Take a chop saw to it, I guess. I'm not sure. So these support pillars I'm making now, obelisks, they're going to partially support parts of the model that are hard to get to, and they'll have the gap support features so they're easy to break off. And what I'll do is I'll come back within Mesh Mixer, and I'll come back and put angle support to meet up with those, so I can get at those weird angles that I can't really get within 3ds Max. I do suppose I could probably get some tubes and rotate them all weird, but it's so much easier to get the angles within Mesh Mixer. It's literally just drag and drop at that point. And we're just going to make sure that we get all the support we need done. Quite a few things need to be supported on this model. But it's worth it. It's worth not having to try to break it out of a block of support material that just shatters your model, and that anything that's fragile is just, there's no way you'll ever get it out. It's just ridiculous. And, you know, I like to kind of take into consideration that if someone else is going to print it, they're going to want to have a pleasant de-rigging experience. It only takes a minute or two, not hours of dremeling, careful, and then if you screw up, it's just a hole in the model. I think there's a lot that can be done to prep models beforehand, so they'll print much better. I'm just going to go ahead and put our raft down so that our support will have something to stick to. And we're just going to go ahead and mirror it across the side. So it'll be even on both sides. And then we're just going to combine all of the obelisks, and then we're just going to boolean them to the rest of the geometry, support material geometry. Now we're going to bring it inside of Mesh Mixer, and we're going to add those pillars that we were talking about. Any weird angles that were hard to get to within 3ds Max is easy to do here. You have even more support. But the beauty about this support is that it breaks off just so easy. It seems like a lot of support, but then it all just falls off. And left with a great model. Phase 4 is conversion. You're going to bring it into Makerware, and we're going to watch it slice layer by layer. You can see how it's going to print. And now with the Siege Mode one, you can see the raft and support come up here. And you can see it prints, and we should see that there will be no unaccounted overhangs. Everything is successfully supported. It's actually a version of it before it had Mesh Mixer support, but it'll be good though. Phase 5 is production. First off, we're going to be putting a teal siege tank mode, and you can see that it kind of screwed up right there because that portion was not supported. So we went ahead and we printed it again in glow-in-the-dark material, and we had that extra support, and it came out beautiful. Took 2 hours and 20 minutes, 24 grams of PLA. There it is. And then we went ahead and did the orange tank, which is the siege mode version. Took 4 hours and 7 minutes. Took 37 grams of PLA. Quite a bit more. Most likely simply because there's just so much more support. But I think it's also a bigger model, and it also has those side legs. So it's a big factor in that. And the top of the model, the turret, is just so thin. I'm not exactly sure how to even print it, but I don't even want to touch it, honestly. It's so thin. Moving on to de-rigging. De-rigging. We are just going to snap all these little supports off. And literally just took about a minute to get them all off. Left with a super clean model because of the gap support. And same thing with the teal one. Super easy to de-rig. Don't even need tweezers or anything. And now the orange one. I'm just going to go ahead and break off the main sections of the support carefully. Then we're going to get some tweezers and carefully work on the internal sections that are a little bit harder to get to. Some of the support actually became embedded within the rest of the geometry, so I had to cut it off with some clippers. But that could be avoided. It's not the end of the world. You can work around it, but you shouldn't have to deal with that. It's kind of a little bit of an oversight in the design of the support, but it's not something that can be worked around. Here's the teal one. It's the first one we printed. It came out pretty good. Pretty good. Let's go to the back of that turret. Kind of rough. Then I printed the glow-in-the-dark tank. And it came out really nice. And this material will actually glow in the dark if you put it in the lights and you put it in a very dark room. And we got the orange one, the siege mode. This came out really nice, except for the ends of the tips of the turret were so fragile they did sort of break. And just both things together. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you like what you saw, please subscribe, like, share, leave a comment, whatever you gotta do. I'll see you next time.